Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare.
Thank you. Okay, once again, welcome. Good to be with those of you physically here and those of you online. Last week, we wrapped up the analytical approaches to working with anger, seeing about how we can reduce some of the causes of anger, actually eliminate some of them, some of the antidotes about how to work with anger when it arises. And this day we'll begin with attachment. And that's the trickier thing. And you've heard me quote Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo many times. Everybody comes and asks how to work with anger. Nobody comes and asks me how to work with their greed. Like, there's things I like. I'm not that interested in giving those up. And so it's actually much more challenging. It's uncomfortable to be angry. It's uncomfortable to be frustrated. We're willing to do something about that. But attachments, well, that's a little different. I mean, some of the big ones that are an issue, yeah, I may work on that, but, pretty sure I have an apple pie at home right now. Saying, I rescued it from the clearance thing at City Market. Wouldn't want it to go to waste. So we sit here and we think about our attachments, and we often don't realize how much suffering it creates when we look at the 3 root poisons that give rise to all of samsara. A key one being misunderstanding, right? Ignorance, a misunderstanding of myself, a misunderstanding of causes of happiness and suffering, just a real misperception of how I exist. It's so easy to just say, I'm here, you're there, there's a cup of water, it's all independent, all separate. What could you have anything to do with how I am? And then I start to think, well, what about this water? Where'd this water come from? And then start to realize, well, I'm 75% water. So are you. And then this water could have been in my teacher's body, could have been their teacher's body. I may actually be drinking, some of the water that was once in Dalai Lama, or, the water that gives life. And we start recognizing, wow, everything about me is dependent, right? It's dependent. I exist independence upon, not just water, air, food, but my thoughts. They were, I was taught how to speak, my clothes, everything. There's nothing independent that I could ever find about myself. I didn't even create my own body. It's funny sometimes, that's my body. Yeah, you created that? Or was it, created for you? So we start reading, wow, everything about me is interdependent. So, just understanding how the world appears to us, how we see ourselves is, it's just very confusing because it seems very clear. And then the causes of happiness and suffering get blurred. And so we've covered that for a bit. And then out of that misunderstanding, there's things I like and there's things I don't like. And the things I don't like, well, there's some anger, there's some frustration. And the things I like, well, then there's, this is mine, man. This is mine. And if I don't have mine, I'm suffering if I lose it. And so these 3 together turn the whole wheel of samsara, because wanting to get this, not wanting to have that, seeing myself as independent, and you or the water or my apple pie or my relationships or the job, as the cause of my happiness or my suffering. Now I'm spinning a whole tale about how I exist. I'm creating literally the samsara that I live in. And so if I don't really notice, I start exaggerating the qualities about people, events, things, I just can't live without you. That's on the wedding day. On the divorce day, I just can't live with you. It's amazing how some of those things can change. Man, got this job. I got it made. You're like, man, I gotta go to work. You know, uh, these things shift, and we exaggerate these qualities. I can't be happy unless, and then we have that, and then you're happy for an hour, day, maybe. Then I got other things I need to be happy. And so this plays out, and it's interesting how, without observing, we don't even really notice. It just seems reasonable. It just seems reasonable, right? I get what I want. I'm happy. Don't get it. Not so happy. And if these things were right, then I'd be good. And a real compelling example of this that woke me up. It's interesting. One of my dear friends who is disabled, like half of her body doesn't work. She's had some strokes, and so she has to have a modified car and modified things to do things. We worked together for some years, and she always, she was resourceful. She was strong, never complained, and she took, one of our mindfulness courses, and she's going through and examining things like this, causes of happiness. And while she was doing it, she was actually at a tough place in her life. And then she had a lot of chronic pain, right? So she's already crippled to some degree, already disabled, already takes a lot of effort. And then she's got all this chronic pain coming up. And then she shared with me that, in examining this, she found how delusional her mind was, because she had the thought that if I could be healthy, I could be happy. Now, on the surface, that seems pretty reasonable, right? Wow, look at her physical condition, look at her pain, look at that. If she could be healthy, she could be happy, right? And she looked around at all the healthy people she knows, and they're not happy. and just the awareness of how our mind, right? It seems reasonable until you look a little more deeply. And she's surrounded by all these, really healthy people who are not happy at all. And so, it's like this. We, unless we're kind of pushed or we examine or we hit a wall one way or another, or that person leaves us, and I can't live without you. And then somehow you're alive 3 months later. And, meeting somebody else, how that happened. And we just start recognizing, wow, all the exaggerations, right? And so with those exaggerations, we get the anger, we get the attachment, then it spreads to the additional creation of samsara and sufferings. The root is always the root freedom or independence from these sufferings is about understanding, what's the real cause of happiness, what's the real cause of suffering, and understanding those imprints. And so we spoke to that a bit. So we addressed the misunderstanding of self, anger, that aversion, now to attachment. And we'll go ahead and pop open the text there.
John Kurt had written that he was having trouble hearing you.
Anybody else having trouble hearing me? Okay, I want to apologize for that right now. You'll have to hear me.
It's probably me. It's probably my
40
computer.
minutes.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, but everybody else mostly good. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and take a peek at the text. Antidotes to attachment. And they use this analogy that somehow makes sense. Never has to me, though. Sensual pleasures are like salt water. The more you indulge, the more thirst increases. I've just never drank salt water. So, I mean, maybe it was a thing back in ancient times. I don't know. But you get the idea, right? It's not going to quench your thirst, right? But there must have been some actual reference there. So sensual pleasures like salt water, the more you indulge, the more thirst increases. Abandon at once those things which breed clinging attachment. This is the practice of bodhisattvas. That's from Tongme Sangpo and the 37 practices of the bodhisattva, of which we are going through in our monthly retreats. As a matter of fact, Sunday we'll be into that. So really abandoning that which brings clinging attachment. It's not saying abandon good motivations or desires, attachment, which has a real different implication. It's relatively easy to recognize the disadvantages of anger because it is so painful. But that's harder to do with attachment since it seems to bring us what we wish for. Many people even believe it is necessary for happiness, success, and healthy relationships. It is common to equate attachment with love, but according to Buddhism, they're very different. Attachment is self-centered. You see the other person as necessary for your happiness, whereas genuine love is altruistic, concerned for another's happiness. If we had more love and less attachment in our relationships, we'd have fewer problems. Some people think that without attachment, they would have no ambition, no motivation to do anything. But this too is a misunderstanding. We can exert ourselves for other reasons, like compassion, altruism, wanting to take care of our family, for instance, or to be a benefit to society and the world. Work done with these motivations rather than self-centered attachment will probably be more satisfying and beneficial both to oneself and others. The following remedies to attachment help us to understand its disadvantages and present alternative ways of viewing things that are wiser, more skillful, and more likely to bring the results we wish for. So that's the intro here. And those of you who've been around a while, the understanding the difference between attachment and love. Actually, attachment in blocks love, right? Robina Courtin's famous quote is, "Love never hurts, attachment does." And so understanding in this context, attachments around this exaggerated view of someone or something, and it's, our need for it. And then, we suffocate someone or we cling to what we have and we need it to be a certain way. When we love someone, I want them to be happy. And in a more modern context, Scott Peck, The Road Less Traveled, I love his view on love. And he equates it to an action. Right? Love is not just a feeling. It is a willingness to extend oneself for another's growth, right? Or their happiness. An act of love. And we kind of know that when we do things that we don't want to do to help someone, it's an act of love, The mom who gets up in the middle of the night, to take care of the kid when they're, crying, that's love, right? Doesn't feel good, but that's love. Now, we could also have the feeling of love, which could be very true, very, joyful in our relationships and our partners, really have a sense of connection. And, grandparents, they have no idea what love is. I'm going to tell you that right now. They only know attachment. when are you giving me my grandkid? Come on, man. I'm looking for some happiness. And but we have these examples, right, of the difference of, but the idea of the joyfulness of when you see like your grandchild doing something kind, and you're just like, yeah, there's a joy. And so the explanation, that's just very clear for me is I confuse love for someone with how they make me feel when they do something I like. I feel good. My wife, does this little nice thing, tells me something good. And yeah, I love her. Then she does this other stuff, and I don't like that, And, it's not about loving her. I love how she makes me feel when she does certain things, and I don't love her so much when she does other things. And we all know I love her even when he does those other things, right? This is recorded. So even when we have these struggles, right? We learn to love and we want the best. And so doesn't always feel good, but the attachment to a person who makes us feel a certain way at a certain time is all about me. It has very little to do with caring about them. And out of that, then we get all the struggles in relationships, the struggles even with friendships, right? Our friend does that thing we don't like, or you sit there and it fascinates me that I can have a friend for 10 years and then they did that thing, and they, my trust, it's gone and you're not my friend anymore. So are they that one thing they did, or are they the 1,000 things they did together with me? Which is it? We were friends. They did a lot of good for me. They did that other thing. Maybe they're not healthy to be around right now, but why would I care less for them, right? Maybe I want the best. Maybe I'll get, some help in some way. And so that's this difference between love and attachment and how we evaluate, is somebody benefiting me or not? I mean, it's very transactional. Very transactional. And the more attached we are, the less capable we are of loving. Because we need this person to act in a certain way, or we need our job to be a certain way, or we need, whatever it is, but we're attached to be just that way because we're seeing it as the source of our happiness instead of a condition that triggers some good feelings. And so confusing stimulus-driven pleasure with an actual sense of love or care, a much deeper sense of well-being and connection. And so examining this, we have the challenge to identify what I'm attached to versus what I appreciate and what I care for, right? Can easily slip over that line. But bringing it back, we can deeply care for people and appreciate them and things that we do and, the things that bring us some joy, that we find. But can you live without them, right? And how terrible it is if you can't. And this will apply even to habits, hobbies, living up here in the mountains where we live, we have a lot of outdoors people. And, as they get older, there's things they can't do anymore, can't ride that mountain bike anymore, can't, do some of the things that was their way of living. And there's a big struggle to let go of a lifestyle. Even a lot of suffering can happen there. That's why I don't mountain bike. And the fact it just looks hard. Carla's like, come on, man, that's like nothing. Practice, right? Practice. Yeah. So I just bust myself up a little bit. Sorry. So first we need to identify that there's a problem, right? It's hard to work with attachment when we're confusing it for something that is beneficial. And so that's where they're going to take us next. That's the sneaky part. It's really easy to identify anger, not very easy to identify attachment. It comes dressed as apple pie. looks like it's there for us. And let's pop open the approaches. So, first one, recognize the shortcomings of attachment. Now, again, these are all analytical approaches that we would spend some time meditating on. And that's the idea, is that we spend a little time every day just reflecting this, bringing it to mind. Us having a conversation about this, not going to be very helpful. But really deeply analyzing, reflecting, bringing it to mind, and then noticing during the day, then we'll get somewhere. So, number one, investigate how attachment affects you. Is your mind calm and clear, or overly excited with full of expectations? Were you ever excited about getting something or going somewhere, but the actual experience was less wonderful than what you expected? Might have some disappointment. Attachment leads to suffering when we don't get something we want. But even when we do get it, we may be disappointed and quickly bored. Recall some experiences of this. And that's an interesting exercise just all its own. I'll sit there and I'll try to remember like all the things that brought me happiness, like, vacations, and nights out, and some achievements that I've had, and getting my 69 Plymouth Satellite 4-door sedan, baby. Everything on that car worked. And just going through some of these things. And then the question is, how long did that happiness last? How long after I got exactly what I wanted did my mind go to what's next? Was it an hour? Was it 10 minutes? Was it a day? I don't think it's longer than a day, because, then you could worry about things you got to do next, or, your mind gets to other things, right? So it's not, I can appreciate some of those things, but, go through that. And then I sit there and go, wow, okay, so in my lifetime, I've had millions of times in my life where I got exactly what I wanted. It was wonderful. Things were great. And I could be disappointed right now. I could be unhappy right now. And my mind can tell me, but if you get this next thing, we're going to be good, man. This next, it'll all be, little financial security, little thing. Yeah, it'll be good. How does that even work? Like, it's never worked over, I'm 62. It hasn't worked for 62 years. I can't tell the early years because maybe it did. I just wasn't, kid. I can't remember that. But, going back to my life, that has never worked. And yet the mind can desire this stability or this thing or that person or that job or whatever, thinking that's going to do it. And then you do it, and then how long does it last? And then there's something else. And so the insanity of that is sneaky because, generally we don't even question it. And then pretty quickly we get, that good feeling. Then we think, okay, well, now I need this other thing. And here in their example, think of how many things that you are just not interested in anymore that once were things you only hoped for. Man, I remember a 19-inch color TV, baby, before remotes. It was color, and that was cool. So, we sit there and we have these things that we don't even care about anymore, but when we got them, that was a thing. And so we want to kind of notice, now, did it bring happiness or did it bring stress? Now, do I need to lock up my bike, worry about where I park my bike? The bikes are expensive, right? And I got this nice one. Now I got to take care of it. I need to worry about it. I need to stress about it. Somebody might take it. Who knows? How much peace of mind, right, with the bike, or with the home. And then the home, and you gotta have the insurance, you gotta have the stuff that to take care of that. And then how do we worry about it, how we do the bills or the job. Then you start noticing that in our attachments to things that we believe will bring us the joy, if you really look at all the things you stress and worry about in life, I bet you it'll be directly tied to all the things you think will bring you joy. House, family, relationships, job, career, right? Source of my happiness is what I stress and worry about all the time. So, taking a look at, okay, is it really good to be attached to all that? Or is it more helpful to actually enjoy your family and be with them, and, your job, do your best, they'll come and go. I don't know about you guys, but I've had a few jobs, and, some ended, and I wound up something else. And had a few relationships too. Yeah. I've been kicked to the curb. I know what that feels like. Painful. And then, new people we meet. And so if I don't recognize that my attachments are really driving most of my stress, worry, fear, anxiety, and insecurity, not much I'm going to do about it, because I don't feel like my insecurity is tied to my attachment. Until I look a little more deeply, what am I insecure about? That I won't get what I want, and I can't keep what I want, and somebody won't like me, or whatever that is, or I won't be good enough, or I can't do that. And so attachment's going to be this really pernicious, sneaky thing in our lives. And if we start paying attention to see how it arises and its impact, how it actually blocks us from appreciating the people in our lives, the things we do have. What would it be like to cultivate contentment instead of desire? So look at what you got. I mean, wow. I mean, we're here in the mountains. It's a pretty sweet little town up here in Carbondale. Most of you out there, I know you're in some pretty sweet spots. I don't know where Ito is right now, but he's a traveler. And we sit there and think, wow, look at all the things we have that are just beyond measure. And that's a very different mind, seeing the wonder in what we have, the attending to and appreciating what we have and the people in our lives. Pretty sure you'll be much calmer, more fulfilled, and stress a lot less. Instead of worrying about what may or may not happen around things that I believe are the source of my happiness. And then the other thing she pointed to was that people believe that without that attachment, we won't do much. And then, she makes this other point that we can be motivated in other ways that are actually more fulfilling. And that's the piece about motivation that I think gets missed a lot in our culture, is reward. We are very motivated for reward. Most of us make big changes in our life, not because of reward, but because of pain, right? This, I hit a wall, lost my job, divorce, whatever, I'm, I have my addictions, or I have my, mental health issues, or I have some trauma, or I got, whatever it is, something, we get here because we have pain. Very few people show up to work on themselves because life's good. It just doesn't work that way. It's all good. We're planning our next vacation, man. But when we're in pain, we're like, let me do something, let me seek, let me understand, let me get to this. So much of our spiritual growth is often pain driven and not reward driven. the reward we get is those dopamine hits from getting what we want. For example, the apple pie waiting for me at home. Did I mention that before? Right. So it's like, okay, well, that's going to feel good. And so we have a lot of things in our life that can make us feel good instantly, right? Instantly. And, not the least of just distraction, Hey, I don't need to just sit on the toilet. I can scroll whatever, learn about whatever, and, can watch some cool cat videos. And what's happening is, a little like I don't have to deal with anything, right? And then we get all these dopamine hits, then we can't even be comfortable being present anymore. As soon as we get to present, our mind, our dopamine deficit kicks in. We're looking for a stimulus. And then we equate that with happiness. And in fact, it's actually undermining my ability to be happy. And so we have all of these instantaneous reward. And they're randomized, so it really hooks. It's kind of like a slot machine. You don't know who's going to pop up. Don't know what email might come in or what thing might happen. And so we get really off track. But if we tap reward back into the things you do that you feel good about, like virtue and the things you do that feel good, and what it's like to be a good person. Like, man, that's so cool to be a good person. Like, wow, like I'm a nice guy, and I'm helpful and I care about people and I'm honest and I want you to be happy and I want, things that are good. When's the last time you just gave yourself credit for that? When do we give ourselves credit for the good we do? That reward system is, not even part of this process so often. It's just what we're supposed to do, But if we can take time and really be present with the intrinsic rewards of virtue, of being a good person, of doing things you feel good about, you're going to be motivated to engage in a life that you look in the mirror and go, yeah, I'm all right. And I'm a decent human being, like that's helpful. And I'm good with my kids, or I'm good with my partner. I'm a good son. I'm a good friend. Those rewards are really potent and last long and actually cultivate the kind of genuine happiness and well-being we seek. And if you can, also offer your friends a piece of apple pie and drive them around your 69 Plymouth Satellite, that's just icing on a cake, And, but it's about the connection, the motivation, I want to share something with my friends, I want to be with them, So really understanding this negative aspect to attachment and then how it creates all of these other mental afflictions, stress, worry, fear, anxiety, insecurity, anger, frustration, it just arises. So but a lot of people don't realize is aversion or anger is actually attachment. See, I'm very attached to not having that happen. I'm very attached to not being around that person, right? I have aversion. I'm attached to that. And so what we want to always distinguish is the exaggerated qualities that we find in attachment and misunderstanding. And then this desire and this need, and then everything that comes with that ruins relationships and hinders my ability to even love another person because I want them to be like this or I want our life to be like that and so forth. So taking a little time to really notice this week, where's attachment arising? If I'm stressed, if I'm anxious, if I'm insecure, if I'm frustrated, pretty quick question. What are you attached to? Mm. We may feel content with some of our relationships and possessions, but attachment wants them to last forever. This is a recipe for suffering because people and things are impermanent, subject to change and disappear. The stronger our attachment to someone or something, the greater our pain will be when we have to separate. And it's an interesting point here because I think that gets lost. Like, it's really okay to be sad when you lose someone you love. You know, that's an expression of love. And that's not necessarily pain. Sadness doesn't have to be pain. Not wanting the sadness, that's suffering, right? Resisting that. And so, a lot of people think, well, I'm not attached, so I don't care about anything. No, I care deeply about these people. I am willing to love, to extend, to care, to feel some pain, to feel some sadness, to connect with humans. And I'm in this human form. And that's important. And we can actually love more deeply. We can experience the sadness as an expression of our love, which is different than the grief and the intensity of the suffering of thinking, really about us losing someone instead of what's actually happened to another person. And so if we were just leave it at that sentence that says, yeah, if you love people or things or attached to them, then you're just going to suffer a lot. Yeah, that'll happen when they're gone. But if you love and care about people and things, we're going to feel sadness. We're going to feel some loss. And that's totally okay. That's, but there's a difference between sadness and suffering. You can feel pretty good about just allowing yourself to feel some sadness. But suffering is, man, I don't want to feel like this. I don't want them to be gone. I don't want, I don't. Versus this is the difficult event that I'm going to have a wide range of experiences with. And, there's a much more stability and depth there. Then it doesn't need to suffer. Suffering, I heard it was actually a monk of a different tradition, Theravada. And he was talking to a bunch of middle schoolers. And one of the middle schoolers, man, big question, what's the difference between pain and suffering? Well, boom, shoots it at him, and because we've all seen the t-shirt, right? Pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And Monk thought about it and said, suffering is when you don't want the pain. It's the resistance to what is. And it just amplifies the pain. And, that makes sense to me. That we want things to be different than they are. And there's so much less suffering when I accept how things are. And then I'm actually empowered to do something about it, maybe. But the resistance, whether it's physical pain or a situation or anything, the mental and emotional suffering, resisting what actually is, creates an additional massive impact of suffering to some normal pain. And then back to Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled. And I think he got this. Well, I'm just going to quote him. That all neurosis is a result of avoiding legitimate pain. In other words, if we just dealt with the pain, we wouldn't have all these poor coping mechanisms and neuroses and anxieties, all this stuff that arises, all the mental health issues. And so Yeah, it could be Carl Jung he got that from. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe Chris could point that out. But that's this distinction of, if I just allow myself to be experiencing these things and living life on life's terms in a way that's healthy, then I'm just not going to have all that additional suffering. Now, from a Buddhist perspective, if you actually saw things clearly and more accurately, there's really no cause for that suffering, right? And so we start understanding that that person is not the actual ultimate cause of your happiness, and this job going that way is not the end of your world. You're just much more balanced with it all, and they're all opportunities to cultivate your inner qualities and your strength and your clarity and your wisdom, and to be a person you feel good about being. Everything is. And so you're not going to suffer as much because you're not caught up in the delusion as strongly. Well, you guys have all let me talk this long without butting in. Who are you? Where's my crew here? Okay. Let's see what else she says here. We'll get to this section. In addition to those obvious disadvantages of attachment, there are also subtler ones. Attachment lies behind many non-virtuous actions like stealing, lying, or killing, which creates problems both now and in the future. It is also a hindrance to spiritual practice since it causes our mind to be repeatedly distracted. We're unable to develop concentration and other realizations needed to reach liberation and enlightenment. So, we do lie to get what we want. Yeah, I always think about all these honest people I know in the world. I look at their resume. Yeah. Or my funnest one is when somebody does a profile on their dating app. I'm this kind of person. I like this. Yeah, I think there'd be a great business, like being like some kind of AI that could give an honest thing. Yeah, I'm pretty open-minded, except when I'm not, and I'm selfish, and I'm like this, except when I'm like that. And, I get moody sometimes, and, wouldn't it be interesting to have like an honest dating profile? Not that we gain dates, but, just this, yeah, I'm really insecure about, uh, you know, but, to get what we want, right? We embellish, we sometimes withhold the truth around something, so we do a lot of things that aren't very wholesome. Manipulate the system a bit. And so, yeah, a lot of non-virtue that we don't feel that good about. And so the task this week is to take some time and notice attachment. So if we can start our day with a little reflection on kind of identifying a few key things. Now, it's going to be really impossible to catch all the attachments that show up in a day. That's, we have all kinds of impulses and habits and attachments. But if we were to identify like a few that are just pretty common, and then just kind of work with that during the day, notice when it arises, or whenever when you're frustrated, when you're in an afflicted state. Quick question: what are you attached to? I really want something to be like this, and what if it was like that? What if it isn't like that? Can you still be okay? As a matter of fact, look at what you've already walked through. I mean, we've survived every single thing that's ever happened to us. 100% success rate. I mean, that's a pretty good average. And so, and yet I can be frustrated in a car in traffic. That one's the most fascinating. You're in a car, man. Put on some Neil Young, baby. You got a car, you got somewhere to go, got some tunes. Like, how tough is my life when I'm, in a car in traffic? And then all of you who've been around for a while, you know what I'm going to say next. What's the big delusion you have when you're stuck in traffic? You think you're stuck in traffic. And in truth, you are traffic. And we're all trying to get somewhere. And what a different attitude that is. And so these are the things that when I'm frustrated, when I'm stressed, when I'm pain, this weight, what do you attach to? And is that attachment based in reality? And if you can ever get to the point where you realize that those attachments or any one attachment is not based in reality and you experience that a few times, something incredible can happen. That seed of attachment is no longer there. And that insecurity or frustration can't arise. There's no seed for that anymore because it doesn't compute that that is what I need. And that is where transformation really happens. We start living reality more. And the more I live in reality, the less of these afflictive states arise. But it doesn't happen by us talking about it. We actually have to experience it, know it, see it, name it, and then know it. And see how worked up we could have gotten over whatever. And then, it didn't really matter. All right, Keith or Kurt?
Yeah, it's me.
Somebody's going to make me stop talking finally. That's awesome.
It's not. Can you hear me all right? Hello?
Trying to find that unmute button. Huh?
I'll just do it on here. That's 400 device. Now you gotta turn that on.
You found the
400
button,
devices
but I
going to
can't
try
hear
to
you
hear.
yet.
All right, I don't know.
Can
if
other
I'm
people hear you
old
guys?
or what,
It might
but
be on my end.
I
I'm
can
attached
hear
to being
him,
able to hear.
You're talking. He said,
but
Can you
there's
hear
an
me?
echo now.
let
They
me
can't
make sure
hear
I
us.
have the right thing on my end.
Mm.
Got my speakers. Got that selected. Got my audio output. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
there
can
we
hear
go.
you
Hang on.
guys.
It's my end.
Keith and Kurt,
I can hear you, Kurt.
You're all good now. It was on my end.
Did you hear?
Oh, he said you're.
Yep,
Can
you're
you
good.
hear?
Oh, in my sleep I can, yeah.
No.
We can hear you.
Yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you hear us?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta turn that off.
Hey,
Turn that one off. Now, can you still hear us?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
good.
This is
Wow,
getting
what's going on
exciting.
here? Sorry.
super
That's
hard.
better too.
Massive attachment to new speakers. I'm thinking about this, and I've been doing this for quite. Intellectually, this isn't a very difficult concept, right? I mean, I can see over time I've been able to see how these attachments and aversions lead to suffering, right? And they're just layered. It seems like there's nothing but attachment. I'm having trouble. The only time occasionally for like brief instance that I feel like I'm not involved in this is when I'm meditating, and I can't meditate all the time. And so it's like, I guess the question is I don't know what the question is. There is no question. It's just an observation that it just seems overwhelming. The depth of my attachments, the depth of the afflictions, right? And I don't, it doesn't mean I won't keep working on it. And I guess if I really look at it honestly, my life has gotten a lot better and I'm a lot happier than I was 4 years ago when I started this process. And so I guess that's good enough. But the more I see them, the more there seem to be, and it's just fascinating to me that just feels like it's just one right after another, after another, after another. And just when I'm wondering what the state would be like without those. Did any of that make any sense?
Sure. Except one thing. You're not always attached, are you? There's many times in your life you are not. Is that true?
I think that's, I don't know. I think I could argue that.
course
Maybe
you
that's
could.
true. I mean, yeah,
Right?
I
Do you
guess I
know
just need to look
do
at
you
it
know
close.
do you know contentment and peace sometimes?
Occasionally, I've seen it like 3 times in my life. A true contentment, true peace. Right? One time I had it for an hour and a half on a beach on the Salmon River, and it just everything just went away, and I just sat there and I was just looking at the water sparkling and I was content. And and
How about
brief,
joy? How about love?
well, I got those, right?
Okay, and doesn't need to be attached.
Yeah, I'm sorry you have to keep talking me off the cliff here. It just
That's my job, man.
it's just such a, it just seems like I, you know, I wasn't happy before I knew any of this stuff, and it see I'm glad I know it, or I'm starting to learn it, but it just seems so big. I can see why it takes countless eons.
Yeah.
You just got to keep working at it, and I want it now. That's another attachment. I just want the results right now. I want to have done the work, I guess.
You
Anyway,
want to have
I
detached.
want to have detached.
Yeah, we don't want detached. We want
I
non-attached.
want to have done it.
You wanna
I
have
want all the
done it.
benefit with none of the work. So that's just pretty much
Yeah.
my standard MO.
Let me
There you
get
go.
an objective opinion. Keith, is he happier now than he once was in the time you've been?
Absolutely, yes. I can
Okay.
see it. It's palpable, obvious, very apparent. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're
I'm
welcome.
not
And
arguing that this stuff doesn't work or anything. It just seems, it's just, I guess it's just hubris. I just want it to work faster. I just
right.
want to get there faster.
And you're also pointing out the thing that is common, which is that as we become aware, we just see more.
Yeah,
The problem is we didn't even see it before.
right.
And now that we see, we go, wow, my mind's all over the place. Wow. Like that's a scary neighborhood. Um, before I was unaware. And as we become aware, we see more, we know more, and the journey's there. And yeah, sometimes it can be a bit overwhelming. And that's why it's always so important to see how far we've come instead of how far we need
Right.
to. Yeah.
Well, I
What's
just get
that?
so
And
tired of it.
I would go a step further, between the two of us. I see Kurt less attached than me about a lot of things, and more so, which is helpful to me as, like him being a bit more of a role model for me in, a lot of these challenges that are arising in my life lately. And um, he he clearly has made progress in allowing a lot more things to just roll off him and maintain that equanimity. Where if anyone's a little bit more stuck, I see myself more stuck on some of these attachments. So maybe Kurt isn't seeing it as clearly as I can, but it's being outside of
I'll
him.
take your word for it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both. Yeah, it's so valuable to have an objective, observer. Yeah, thank you, Keith.
Thank
And
you.
all right, Chris.
All right. I'm trying out some new speakers too. Can you hear me?
Oh yeah.
Okay, awesome. Um, so, I was thinking about this idea of, you were kind of talking, I think yesterday or this morning about, luxury being an obstacle. And so I was thinking, if I'm used to going to the grocery store and not having a line, if I'm used to going fishing and catching fish, if I'm used to going, for a hike and having the trail to myself, then there's this expectation. I'm attached to that idea. And so then when something new comes in and I don't catch fish, or there's a line at the supermarket, or the parking lot's full, then I notice, this kind of dis-ease that comes up. And I think you mentioned it today about one of the best antidotes is like appreciation. If I can be like in traffic and be like, okay, well, my expectation is I'm attached to getting from point A to point B quickly, but if I'm, can I find some appreciation and go, okay, well, I can listen to this podcast, or can I figure out some way to people watch at the grocery store, or can I, you know, enjoy looking at the mountains, even if I can't, we're looking at the river or whatever. So I think it's like that. I think half the battle is just like being aware that I want things to be a certain way. And then the other half is just like finding a way to be appreciative of, you know, all the abundance in our life. And that seems to be something that I'm able to catch myself. Um, I may not have what I want to eat, but can I appreciate having something to eat? If I don't have whole milk in my coffee, can I appreciate having powdered milk? Or maybe it's like, hey, it's an opportunity to learn to drink black coffee. Um, I haven't got to the place where I can appreciate just hot water yet. That's kind of the next level. But anyway, I think, yeah, that just you kind of shifting our finding something to appreciate, and that seems to just create a whole new layer of kind of mellowness. So, anyway, those
Yeah,
are
thanks,
those are
Ruth.
my thoughts.
Yeah. And so this is the other, two approaches. One is, identifying the problem. And the other is proactively doing something quite opposite, right? And so that's where, like, loving kindness is the antidote to anger and hatred. If you turn a light on in a dark room, there's no darkness, right? So when I am proactively caught up in appreciation, you're not going to find, those afflicted mental states, right? You're going to be cultivating contentment. Those other things don't arise. So you can proactively be deeply appreciating these things and cultivating contentment, and you won't be actively cultivating the attachment. And then, as you point out, when you notice that, you can learn to shift that gear, right? Shift that gear. And for the record, I'm really happy when you don't catch fish. So yeah, that's another thing is, some things that we think that we like, other people don't like. I used to use apple pie for that example, but I just haven't found anyone who doesn't like apple pie. Anybody here not like apple pie? Anybody? Nobody. Okay, that's why I use like Brussels sprouts now.
I've heard cherry pie is better.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, I think there's evidence, but I used to like how did I get on this? Just that our attachments, how we do things, other people have the opposite. So it's just that, how we perceive it. And I love the, Chris's example of shifting that when you notice that you can, shift that gear into appreciation. And the more that you can do the proactive appreciation and have that as a habit, the greater your capacity to shift it. It's harder to if we don't practice that skill of appreciation, contentment. So that can be a really active thing that we can do as well. All right. So coming up to the end here, Rachel.
Yeah, it's the reframe.
Reframing. Yep. Reframing. The skill of reframing. Yep. You didn't like my shifting gear word. Okay. You reframed my gear shift analogy. So I'm in the car today. I've been thinking about my Plymouth this whole time. So all right, so let's go ahead and dedicate the merit, the wisdom, the merit and wisdom of our time together for the benefit of all beings. If you'd care to join me in that, I'll bring up the formal dedication, but informally, and to prepare our minds. there's just a lot of things we could have been doing on Wednesday night, and we have gathered together to cultivate our hearts and minds, to engage in teachings, to be of benefit to others, to extract the essence of these precious teachings that have been made available to us. There's a great deal of merit in that. We support each other as we share with each other how to engage in this world in ways that are compassionate and wise, cultivating our inner qualities and developing ourselves to where ultimately we can recognize our own Buddha nature and be of ultimate benefit to all. And with that motivation, those who'd care to can join me in the dedication. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Om Tare Tu Tare, Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare, Tu Re Soha. Om